So, good evening, everyone. We are going to be doing the first part of our detox talk. It's actually much more than a detox talk. I'm going to be taking you through a bit of a health journey, all about the gut and all what happens when we're eating the wrong foods, how we get inflamed, how toxins enter our body, and what they do. But first, let me talk about my who I am. So I'm a naturopath and I practice at the Wellness Sanctuary in Gold Coast with a team of amazing other holistic GPs, naturopaths. We've had kinesiologists, psychologists, IV nurses. So we're a really nice team and we have an amazing ability to help each other over the 15 years that I've been doing this for. I've had some amazing conversations with my colleagues and just getting each other's perspectives and increasing each other's knowledge. It's just a really fast way to learn. And speaking of learning, I have to know it all. Like my brain just wants me to know all the details, all the ins and outs. So yeah, I went off and did 3 degrees, and I didn't have a life. I did summer and winter school. Luckily, I had a really good group of friends that I studied with, and so it was not really for me a chore. I loved going and I loved learning, but that enabled me to like get the best perspective of like nutritional health, herbal health, and then also, as a naturopath, all the biochemical pharmacology, biology, human disease, all the medical stuff, and then tie it all in together. So having a holistic GP mentor me for like a decade and a half really helps. Just upskill and do all sorts of stuff that, I wouldn't have usually done as a naturopath. But in that process, just learning about, from the most scariest things like cancer and repairing the DNA to the more standard things everyone should be doing, and that's like helping their body become toxin-free, and then helping with hormones, fat loss, sleep, being hydrated, a bit of left field. So, some of the psychology stuff like parenting, mental health, because that's all important in the wellness journey. A couple of years ago, created a supplement company called RecoverDapt, and I really wanted to be able to save patients time and make things easier for them. So I would combine all the amazing things I was using for the gut into one product, all the amazing things I was using for sleep and relaxation into the one product. So, each of the blends are more like 4 or 5 other supplements we would be prescribing to someone, but now conveniently all together in one blend. Super clean formulas, nothing artificial, no fruit extracts, no sugar, not even monk fruit or stevia, just the taste of the herbs themselves. Still very palatable. So that was a big passion of mine to make very therapeutically dosed supplements that is really going to impact someone and make it easy as well and affordable. I also founded Pre-Filters. This is a water filter company because, we are full of water, right? 70%. And there's no point drinking tap water because it is full of contaminants. We did speak about it the other day, and we'll be speaking about that more in depth next week. So I look forward to getting to that segment of it. So what are we covering? Mouth to south, a bit of a joke. The vagus nerve. What is leaky gut? The impact of leaky gut and having too many toxins. Endogenous toxins. So what are these endogenous toxins? Basically things inside our body. And symptoms of all these. What are all the symptoms of having leaky gut, of having endogenous toxins? And what can we do about it? What are some practical tips that I can give you and concepts to think about to do about it and prevent it? So that's my goal to cover in the time we've got tonight. So if anyone's never bothered to look at the gastrointestinal tract, that is it. Food comes down our esophagus into our stomach. We don't always carry acid around, by the way. We make stomach acid as we need it. And so as we're producing the acid, it's really important to think about fast food and takeaway. All of a sudden it's there, it's ready, and we're eating it. The body needs time to smell this, and the receptors are saying, hey, there's food coming, we're cooking it, and it's producing all the stomach acid. The body is prepping to produce the bile acids and all the pancreatic enzymes to break the protein, carbs, and fats down. So we've got to give the body time to understand that we're about to eat, and we've got to be conscious of what are we even eating in the first place? What are we thinking? Did you know eating in a stressful state is one of the worst things if you are worried about putting the calories from that food into your fat reserves? they'll go straight in there if you're eating while you're stressed and you've got higher cortisol. Because the body thinks that we're, in a lack, that there's some famine coming up and we're in a stressful state, we can't go and get more food. That's our mechanism for our body because that's how we've evolved. We're not used to having food on demand all the time. So bringing our stress levels down and de-stressing before we eat really helps with the whole picture of mitigating inflammation, cortisol, and fat. Enteric nervous system, a fancy word for this highway from the gut to the brain. We always have communication back and forth, and that's what the vagus nerve goes up through, communicating throughout all our entire body. And we use a lot of microbes for this. Like we are more bacteria than anything else. So we have to look after the environment of all these bacteria where they live, and that is in the lining of our gut. If we have, damaged that gut, then we're removing the environment where they're thriving and now they can't live. Almost like trying to, expect a nice patch of green grass outside to flourish when you've got concrete there. You don't have a nice layer of topsoil, i.e., this mucus area within our gut for the bacteria to live in. This is some of the stuff what happens if we are stressed and inflamed. And a big part of what the vagus nerve does is de-stress us. It's the main component of our parasympathetic nervous system, and it's what helps our body go from fight or flight into rest and digest. Being in sympathetic mode is almost like you're being chased by a tiger or a lion. Everything gets shut down that's not necessary. You don't need to be digesting food when you're running for your life. You don't need to be regulating hormones when you're running for your life. So all the energy gets diverted to other areas of the body. So if we can calm ourselves down, the vagus nerve is able to assist us doing that. It's helping to regulate our blood pressure. It's helping to regulate the way we are transpiring and breathing. It's amazing all the different aspects that it can do. It even can affect our mood. It helps our brain release things like epinephrine and dopamine to make us feel calm and collected and relaxed, also motivated. So really important, the vagus nerve, if you've never really dealt with it. And if you've ever looked at an ice bath or been in one, that's one of the strategies to getting the vagus nerve stimulated is cold therapy. Not everyone loves to sit in an ice bath, but it's a great way to stimulate the vagus nerve. So when I talk about leaky gut, our mouth to south is should be a non-permeable junction all the way through. Nothing should make its way through unless the body wants it to. So we have these little receptors on top of these junctions that let nutrients in. But it stops all of the pathogens, the alpha toxins, the endotoxins, the LPSs, which is the outer shell on bacteria, the food particles. All this stuff should be very tightly woven to stop bacteria leaking through. And what happens if we're stressed, we're inflamed, we're eating foods we're intolerant to, this starts to damage the lining of the leaky gut, and now we are getting toxins come in. Here's some examples. So the lipopolysaccharides are what I was referring to before. So we have bacteria, and it's the outer membrane of the bacteria. And when they wiggle their way into our bloodstream, our body reacts very strongly to these LPSs and causes an immune reaction. Same with undigested food particles. So it's like the body's like, you should not be in here. And if you've got leaky gut, even if it's not a food intolerance or a food allergy, if that food particle is constantly seen in your body, as your leaky gut gets worse and the weeks go to months and nothing's being done about it, now you're developing more and more food intolerances. That's how the mechanism works, because your body just gets triggered and it's always, heightened whenever it sees these particles. So now it associates these food particles with that food. And when you eat that food, now you've got some sort of intolerance to it. It's causing more inflammation, even if that food was a healthy food in the first place. What about the other bacterial toxins. So we can have good and bad bacteria, but we can have an imbalance in them. So certain bacteria will cause systemic effects, which is another way of saying effects throughout the entire body, not just linked to the gut. We're talking about effects in the nervous system, in our immune system, on our skin. They have long spreading effects throughout the body. I find doing a microbiome analysis, which is like a stool test, we can actually see that which bacteria are leading to, inflammation in the bowel, which one are making it hard for the good bacteria to survive. So we have a complete ecology of all these good bacteria growing in our body, and if we allow our environment to become hostile to our good bacteria and favorable to the bad bacteria, we get this imbalance. Environmental toxins do make their way through. I won't really go into that because that will be next week's talk. But a lot of people react to gluten and casein, which is a protein from milk. Lactose is the sugar from milk. If I was to give you an overview out of all the food intolerance testing that I've done on thousands of patients, I would say dairy, grains, gluten-containing grains, nightshade vegetables, and legumes and lentils. What's common in all of those things is lectins. The dairy mimic lectins, and the other food groups I mentioned contain an abundance of lectins. Lectin is a natural plant chemical that the plant creates to defend itself from insects eating it. But we, unfortunately, we artificially modify our foods to have high levels of these lectins so the insects don't go and eat them. We pick things when they're not ripe, we artificially ripen them, and now we're consuming a diet full of lectins, and especially those food groups have much higher amounts than normal. Here's a tip. You can pressure cook the majority of the lectins out of the food. So I'm going to email you a list of what lectins are and what you can do to substitute them. But knowing some of the, like the rice and legumes and lentils, you can throw in a pressure cooker and remove the lectin component. Can't remove the gluten component, but you can remove the lectin component. Candida and other fungal toxins, again, we'll chat about that more in depth later. But essentially, if you do have pathogens, active pathogens, we like to call them, then they have their own waste. They're, not a nice picture, but they're putting in our body and they themselves do damage. And so they then create this imbalance within our body. That candida is a really common one. Heavy metals, also, unfortunately, if we're eating contaminated food, they're going to make their way in. Pathogenic microbes. So before we spoke about good and bad bacteria, and some of the bad bacteria can be as a result of having your environment not so favorable. But then there is pathogenic bacteria, things that we get infected by that then go off to do a lot of damage. Endotoxins, alpha toxins, these are like gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria that when they die in our bloodstream, the cell wall breaks apart and release all these toxins and trigger all sorts of additional inflammatory and immune problems. So what does that actually mean for us? Like, what would we feel if this was to happen? So there's some of the symptoms: fatigue, headaches, muscle aches, brain fog, skin problems, eczema, psoriasis, eczema, for example, mood swings. So if you've got any of these, there's a good chance that, a lot of those toxins are potentially leaking in, and that's what your body's reacting to. What else is happening as all these toxins are coming in? They don't just float around. They get accumulated and popped inside fat cells. So our body will generate a whole bunch of fat and stuff all these toxins in there and put it around our bum, tummy, and thighs, and especially in our visceral fat. It just gets loaded up full of toxins, usually because they are fat soluble, so it's very easy and a good way of storing them. So yeah, when we lose a whole bunch of weight, guess what happens? These toxins come out. So if you've ever tried to lose weight and your body's like, nah, not going to happen, it's generally because your body's saying it's not safe to lose the weight. There's toxins, there's inflammation. You haven't fixed that problem yet. So until you do, I'm not going to let you break them down because I can't handle getting them out. So our fat can actually be a protection mechanism for our body. So when you have all these toxins come in and you've got the stress and it's all the gut junctions become leaky and they all leak in, what is actually happening to the body? So then it is our journey from mouth to south, right? So now we have leaky gut around and we've got those membranes allowing things in. So who has to do a lot of the work cleaning all these toxins up? The liver does. Unfortunately, the liver cops it. When we're stressed, the liver cops it. If we've got too many hormones that we can't get rid of, the liver has to deal with it all. And it's dealing with all these additional toxins. Its job really should only be our metabolic waste, not everything else. So unfortunately, leaky gut just piles on the work, and this can lead to the liver being stressed, and it doesn't do its job as well in other areas. So I find when this occurs, the body starts to become acidic. You guys can actually go buy the pH strips, and you want to get ones from the range of 5.5 to 8. There's a good brand called Hydron. You can get them from eBay, a health food store. 5.5 to 8 is the range because you want to see small increment changes like 5, 5.5, 6, 6.2, 6.4, for example. And you can be testing the output of your urine. And on average, if it's anywhere between 6.2 to 6.8, 2 hours after eating, generally that means your liver's like, yep, I've been able to, create enough homeostasis, keep everything in control, use just enough minerals to remove all the acidity, that the output of the urine is at that level. Internally, you're going to be higher than that, but the output of the urine does not equal what the body is. So that's where we want to see it. If it's much higher, it means you've got these, think of these little fires all over the place. And instead of just using a small bucket of minerals to, throw over the fire to put it out, like a bucket of water, you've got the fire truck in and you're just spraying all these fires out, but you're wasting a whole bunch of minerals doing so. And those minerals, like potassium, calcium, and magnesium, are ending up in the urine. And when you test it, the pH is high. So it can be an indication that there's an issue, but your body is not in control and it's wasting minerals to do so. That's not the ideal situation, but having really acidic urine means that that's been going on for some time, that whole analogy I've just given you, and now your reserves are so low it can't even, get it to the point where the pH is good. So if you're 5.5 and lower all the time, you need to really build up your mineral reserves. But what happens if you don't do this? As you kind of stay acidic and you're missing these key minerals, you're not able to absorb other ones. And so the longer you're acidic, the harder it is to absorb minerals and the problem compounds. It just gets harder and harder to fix the problem. So often we need to give the liver some very specific buffering minerals to help it out until it can get back on its own and do the job properly. What else happens when we're acidic? Well, we're more likely to get pathogens come in. And before I mentioned what happens when we give them a favorable environment, that's what I'm referring to being acidic. That's now their favorable environment, and that's hostile for us to live in. So we don't want to set up the perfect breeding ground for them. We want to take that away from them and make it hard for them to survive. Through this whole process with malnutrition, all these pathogens, inflammation, our immune is always going to be triggered. So when the immune's triggered due to inflammation, more inflammation is created. And so now you kind of get stuck in this circle of like a perpetual inflammatory cycle. And that's just, exacerbating all the gut symptoms like bloating, gas, cramps, and feeling uncomfortable, feeling tired after you eat. They're just signs saying, hey, there's problems going on. You need to do something about it. But you don't always get those symptoms. You can still have this going on without those symptoms. What are some other things you're going to notice? So yes, you're going to get specific digestive issues like we just went over, but it might be other things. So you might have more foods you're intolerant to, as I was explaining before. Brain fog, the clarity, being able to remember people's names. We just put the keys, where are they now? Someone asks you, please go do this, and they forget. It's, brain fog. Mood imbalances. So, we're all stressed. And if, there's too much pressure being put on us, some people snap more than others. And that can be attributed back to the leaky gut. Because remember, I spoke about the whole neurotransmitters in the brain and the whole vagus nerve keeping us calm. Well, if it's not doing it, we're more likely to be irritated, angry, depressed, anxious. Skin problems, if you're not removing toxins through the bowels, breathing them out, peeing them out, they're going to come out through the skin. So whenever we see the eczema, hay fever, psoriasis, external symptoms, we know internally things aren't being flushed out properly. Of course, a lot of some of the toxins can accumulate in joints, so you're going to get joint pain. And the moment you're damaging the microbiome, where all of our gut bacteria live, that's predominantly a good chunk of your immune system. So now your immune's lowered, and now you're acidic and more likely to pick things up. And again, you see my point? You kind of just get stuck in this cycle. So here's the only thing really in an ideal world that our body should be focusing on. It shouldn't have to deal with all that other stuff that we've just gone over. It should just be focusing on what we make as this massive big factory making this waste. So we're making ammonia from breaking down protein. We're making urea from the ammonia we've created. Lactic acid, whenever we're exercising, we create lactic acid. With bilirubin, have you ever seen the whites of the eyes go a bit yellow or the skin a tinge of yellow? It can be a buildup of bilirubin, reactive oxygen species. So this is what we call, uh, what's the word? Like an oxidative process. We have antioxidants that protect us from oxidation, and these guys are oxidizing us. They're causing oxidative stress. And so if we have excess amounts of these species, then we don't have the ability for our antioxidants always to come in and calm them down. Often it's a natural process. We're creating these ROSs because we might need to kill some bacteria, so our body makes hydrogen peroxide. But if that stays around for too long, it can be harmful. Our body makes nitric oxide, for example, to dilate the blood vessels. But if there's an inflammatory state, it gets turned into peroxide nitrate, which is now one of those oxidative stresses, the ROSs. And if you've got too many of these floating around, that's aging us. I like to use the analogy of like cutting an apple in half and watching it go brown. That's what happens when there's a lot of oxidative stress. We're aging, and that's the last thing that any of us want. So, what happens when all these things that our body naturally makes, we can't get them out because some of our elimination pathways are congested? So, we might get fatigued, we might have a loss of appetite, mental confusion along with the brain fog, shortness of breath, because again, that respiration is a big important part of detoxifying, and muscle weakness, usually due to like the inability to absorb a lot of magnesium and getting the muscle twitches, cramps, and pain. There's a lot more symptoms than these. This is just some of them. So again, here's a nice picture that demonstrate all the different areas in our body that are helping to clean us and cleanse us all the time. If you've ever had a pool and you've got one of those pool cleaners that, go around and pick up all the leaves on the bottom of the pool, that's kind of like our lymphatics. There's, thousands upon thousands of these little things you can see, little fingers just moving around like collecting waste, collecting waste, collecting waste. And they kind of like dump it into our bloodstream, which then goes up into our main veins and then down through the kidneys and the spleen to clean it up. And then our liver gets a whole chunk of them too. The kidneys, we make urine. So your dirty blood is what urine is, and we pee it out. And the liver is combining it with, bile, and it goes out through our stool. Other times we are expelling it through our lungs. And the last thing you want is for it to go out through the skin, but the skin is our largest organ, and it does help us detoxify if these other areas are not working properly. So a big part of why you'll always see me drinking is because we need to be getting a decent amount of water for our body to continually clean this situation up. There are different toxins. Some are water soluble, And that's why, they'll be deposited in some of those areas and provide some of those joint issues and muscle symptoms that we spoke about before. But a lot of them are getting stored in fat areas, including the brain, because our brain is made of fat. So yeah, we need to make sure that we are preventing this in the first place, and if it has happened, one step at a time to try and get them out safely. So what can you do about it? I can spend an hour talking about what are you going to do about it, but I'll give you some of the basics. So dietary changes. Start by making a journal and writing down every time you have flatulence. You feel tired after you eat. You get bloating. What did you just eat? If it's a delayed reaction, sometimes it can be 72 hours of like an accumulation of certain small triggers that build up, build up, build up before it crosses your threshold, and then the symptoms come on. So it's almost a good idea keeping a diary regardless of you getting reactions, but just like highlighting the ones that are commonly occurring around the time of you getting these triggers, these symptoms. So then you can remove them all and give the gut a break. It takes like 72 hours, 48 to 72 hours for the gut to repair after you've eaten something that's damaged it. So if you're continually eating something, it's never really going to get a chance to fully repair. It's just getting worse each day. So the first step, stop eating the things that are damaging it. Dr. Gundry, that's what I was referring to before with the lectin foods. If you Google Dr. Gundry Plant Paradox, he's got a book on it. He has free PDFs. They're the ones I'll be emailing you. So it has a bit of a shopping list. It breaks it down into like grains and poultry and dairy and alternatives. So you can see what the alternatives for the lectin-containing foods, because that's almost like a bit of a shotgun approach. Again, this is the common things I've seen in patients after doing intolerance testing. We did it for almost every patient. So they're the groups, if you can just avoid, give the gut time to heal, generally 3 to 6 months, then reintroduce some of these things and just be very mindful of what you feel when you reintroduce them. If you get worse, that's just something you need to put aside. Some food intolerances are transient, meaning they're intolerant because of the situation. You might have candida that's triggering the food response. You might have small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, or you might have a histamine releasing food. And because of the environment and the current situation of your body right now, you have those problems with those foods. But you fix those issues, and now the what is triggering the response to the food goes away, and you can generally eat that food again. But some foods are more on a cell-mediated level, meaning it's almost hard-coded in that your body is just triggered by that food, even with a now healthy gut. So they're the ones you're just going to have to avoid more long-term or go see someone to help desensitize them. Whole food diets. So really, if you pick up some food and you look on the back of the packet and you don't recognize every single thing in there, it's not a whole food. It's processed. Not everything is bad that's processed, but if you can't recognize what the things are, then you probably should be avoiding it. I'm going to have to try and find it, but I have a bit of a code breaker that I can email you, and it shows you all the different numbers and it decodes what these numbers are on the back of the packet. Now that technology is advanced, I'm sure there are apps that I've seen where you can even scan barcodes of stuff and it just tells you, hey, this is what's in there. This is more for personal care. But the app just sort of shows you all the things in the food that are causing problems for you to avoid. So by the way, why have fruits low in sugar? Because if you're eating fruits like mangoes, dried fruits all the time, then it's still sugar. Sugar's sugar. There's natural versions of it, like fructose, but ultimately it's still spiking your insulin and causing some metabolic issues. So fruits in season are the ones, hopefully, that haven't been stored and artificially ripened. So that's why ideally we should be having, seasonal fruit that are spray-free organic. Lean protein. So usually the white meats are better. Grass-fed, grass-finished if you're going to go for some of the red meats. Things like pork is just nothing good about that at all. If you want grass-fed, grass-finished beef, that you trust the source, that's good. And some of the, white meats that have been humanely grown. And I'm talking about like chickens, for example. So what else did I need to make a note about in there? Healthy fats. There's nothing wrong with fat. So trans fats are the bad ones. Things like margarine, all the nut oils and processed oils, vegetable oils, really bad. Things like ghee, coconut oil. Yes, they're a saturated fat, but they're a stable saturated fat, and they're good to use in cooking. Rather than use olive oil, which is a fantastic oil, it's a polysaccharide. It's not really going to like being heated because it will break down into a trans fat if you heat it and break the bonds. So olive oil is good for cold salads and things like that. And lifestyle changes, like stress literally is the killer of everything. And any little problem you've got that we've discussed, stress will amplify it. It will make it worse. And so if you can have a journal at night, you're journaling what you're grateful for, get everything out of your head on paper, don't internalize it. There's apps like binaural beats where you can download and you have headphones and it sends a frequency in one ear that's slightly different to the other, and the brain hears the difference in frequency. And what that does is that difference in frequency is stimulating the brain to have a particular action. And as you're listening to it, it's helping you focus. It's helping you de-stress. That's called binaural beats. Who is it? Andrew Huberman has a really good podcast on binaural beats. And what else? If you're around toxic, negative people all the time and you can get away from them, I highly recommend you do, because it's just not a good environment for you to be constantly stressed all the time. And getting out and being in groups of like-minded people, whether you're meditating together, doing yoga together, Tai Chi, for example, are really good strategies to calm the mind down. Even breath work. Breath work is really helping, and alternative nostril breathing is helping to sort of stimulate that vagus nerve and pull us out of that fight or flight into the parasympathetic mode. And most importantly of all is sleep. Sleep is so underrated that I would say 1 out of every 10 patients, I'm like, tick, your sleep's good. The other 8 at least to 9, there's some issue with sleep. You're not getting to bed on time. You're waking up unrefreshed. You're frequently waking throughout the night. So sleep is something that if we're aiming to be healthy, we've got to take it into huge consideration. Bed around 9, 9:30. Make sure that you have a good sleep hygiene. So you're teaching your brain an hour before bed, this is the sequence of things that I'm doing, getting the kids' lunch ready for tomorrow, finishing up all the emails. Screen time really should be finished an hour before bed. If you really have to be on the screen, get some glasses like this, and they block the blue light. The blue light from the screen inhibits your melatonin and it stops the sleep initiation. There's apps like Flux, Flux, you can install on your phone and on your computer. And as the sun goes down, it starts to make your screen more and more orange because it's pulling the blue light out. Um, I'll go to the next page because there's a few little more tips about sleep. You can tell I'm passionate about sleep. What else can you do for detoxifying? What about skin? So, you can buy these skin brushing, and what that's effectively doing is helping your lymphatics pull those toxins because all of our lymph fluid pools in our feet. And if you've got swollen ankles and, what they call them, cankles, then your toxins just sat there. Your lymphatics can't get them back up into the blood for your body to get rid of. So dry skin brushing is really good for that. Saunas, specifically infrared sauna and far infrared sauna. A hot sauna will make you sweat. And remember how he said stuff comes out through the skin? You'll do it out that way, but I much prefer infrared and far infrared combination saunas. They target the cells much more specifically and help the cell eject the content of the toxins out rather than just completely forcing it out through our skin. You don't have to get crazy hot and sweat like mad in an infrared sauna. The temperature is much less. And more recently, you may be noticing with, fabrics. If you are wearing those gym clothes, those tight lycras and, polyesters, they are full of nanoplastics. You're sweating, you're hot, your skin is now permeable and you're absorbing all these uh, nanoparticles of plastic into your skin. So hemp, cotton, wool. I mean, if we're in Queensland, that's out of the picture. But really try and look at what are you actually wearing on your skin all the time. We're applying lotions and serums to try and absorb into our skin. What we're wearing is doing the same thing as well. Like I like cotton, it's nice and light, but hemp is also a really good fiber. Kidneys. So we covered it before. Drink plenty of water. There's a whole bunch of nice teas that you can have that are natural diuretics that help you pee more. Cleavers is one of them. It's one of my favorites. And liquid herbals. When it comes to the bowels, bowel cleansers. So there's certain things that help you become more regular, like fibers, psyllium, flaxseed, LSA, so like linseed, sunflower, almond meal. These are good along with magnesium to try and bulk up the stool and pull the toxins out and get your bowels more regular because you should be going to the toilet 2 or 3 times a day to move your bowels. Sometimes that shocks people. They're like, I don't go more than once a day. Others say, I don't go more than once every couple of days. It should be 2 or 3 times a day. Unless you're doing fasting and one meal a day, it should be 2 or 3 times a day. So you need a plenty of water to make that happen. Magnesium as well. Lungs. So I love having those little salt lamps. They're like slowly releasing ions onto the air that then grab onto environmental particles and pollutants and dropping them to the ground. You can do inhalers, so you can get like the nebulizers and inhale essential oils, or you can get a diffuser in the room that's just diffusing like nice calming peppermint and chamomile and relaxation essential oils. The liver, we've spoken about so much. There's so many different things that the liver can use to help all of those pathways, all the toxins line up at the liver, and there's kind of like 4 pathways. Think of them as 4 doors, and the toxins need to get out. And so the liver needs nutrients and herbs for those doors to open to be removed. So that's kind of like why I made the detox assist because it does support those 4 pathways of the liver. It does help so with some natural diuretics and supporting the kidneys and the lymphatics and the spleen and slightly bowels. So it's a good all-rounder that's nice and gentle. That's not going to throw you into a crazy detox reaction. It's just going to support your body removing all of that metabolic waste and then trying to mop up some of those other endogenous toxins. But to stop them coming in the first place, we've got to heal that gut. And predominantly, it's all going to be your diet and stress levels. The gut greens I've made to assist that process. So it's a whole bunch of all those nutrient-rich herbs like moringa, for example, and kale to get all those nutrients into someone that's quite acidic for a long time, that's going to be quite malnourished. And at the same time, it's got the gut healers in there. We're using things like choline, maitake mushroom, broccoli to try and repair the gut. And there's a mechanism called secretory IgA, and that is your first line of defense. It's what helps your immune system recognize friend from foe. And instead of your body always reacting and always saying, oh, now that food's bad, now that food's bad, secretory IgA helps calm that whole system down. It's like, no, that's actually good. Okay, that one is bad. So the gut greens is designed to try and repair the gut, increase that secretory IgA, and have a whole bunch of organic veggies and superfoods like the moringa, the nettle, the gynostemma, that's going to help with like long-term anti-aging. So for me, they're like a nice stack that go well together. A teaspoon of each in a glass of water. You've got those one of those little mixers, like the milk frothers. That's perfect to mix up really well. And you're doing that twice a day. It doesn't matter so much if it's before food, with food, after food. I do it fasted because I'm usually fasting, so that's I do that fasted. And in terms of water, 40 mil per body kilo. So for example, if you're 70, get out your calculator, 70 times 40, 2,800 mil, i.e. 2.8 liters. Drinking that throughout the day, ideally away from meals. If you're just about to have a meal, don't go and try and drink a whole liter because you dilute all the stomach acid. Do it in between meals. But it is fine to put a bit of apple cider vinegar or a bit of lemon in your water and drink it with a meal because that will kind of compensate for it. We spoke about sleep, so the last bits of advice that I said I was going to give you, turn the Wi-Fi off, turn the phone on airplane mode, because that EMF, which we'll speak about next week, is a huge burden on your body. It's distracting the pituitary from getting into that circadian sleep cycle. Avoid your food intolerances. As I said before, just it's not worth eating them. The bowels we spoke about 2 or 3 times a day. Get out and move. Your lymphatics need you to move for that lymphatic action to help all the toxins end up in the blood and then be filtered out. You don't have to go crazy exercise, just walking. Whatever you can do is going to make a big difference. So I'll stop sharing. So that's it. That's a bit of a overview of how I would take someone through a journey of getting their gut right, preventing them from damaging again. Some of the toxins getting in and their functions or their effects, what symptoms you're going to be experiencing if this all happens to you, what you can do about it. And in terms of testing, microbiome analysis is a really good test. I take a sample of the stool and they're going to be checking what pathogens you have in your body, what functional areas of your gut do you have inflammation? Is your pancreas not producing enzymes? Do you have leaky gut? And then do you have enough good bacteria? Is the balance of good bacteria correct? Because you have gram negative and gram positive. Or do you have pathogens? Is there pathogenic bacteria in there, or viruses or fungus? There's a really good overview to go speak to your practitioner about getting a microbiome analysis. So that's probably one of the most important things that I would do if someone does experience a whole bunch of those symptoms, because it's really the starting point. If you can get the gut right, the stress right, and the sleep right, everything else follows. The body's a lot easier to detoxify when you've got those things under control. And as a result, inflammation starts to come down. So that is the big picture. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for getting on. Look forward to catching up with you on next Monday. And remember, Sam's talk is on Friday.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.